Good afternoon. My name is Candace Anderson of Reflections Funeral Services. On behalf of the family, I thank everyone for being here today to honor and pay tribute to Jim. Today we remember in full the joy and strength that was Jim. As we gather together, we'll find ourselves here for three reasons: to grieve, to celebrate, and to embrace fellowship. Throughout today and in the weeks, months, and years to come, it will be unpredictable which feeling overwhelms us at different times. Today will be a fluctuation of all three as we shed tears in our pain, laugh in our memories, and turn to a friend for understanding. We grieve because we loved. To feel empty is because someone once made you full. It's not a bad thing to know that you cared for someone and built your life with them involved. Yes, it makes it more difficult, but more worthwhile. Life is delicate, and we have only a few chances to really make the best of it. Jim knew what made him feel at peace. It was nature. It was animals. It was dad jokes and puns. It was the farm. It was meeting new people. It was valuing his relationships. And it was family. Jim had a love of many things, but his family was always the center of his heart. I now invite Alex Taylor to share with us a prayer and scripture reading.
The scripture reading I'm using is the 23rd Psalm. 23rd Psalm is probably the most famous piece of poetry ever written. In both Hebrew and English, it's been known throughout the world. It's a beautiful piece of poetry, but we have to remember that it wasn't written just for its beauty. The writer comes from a time when he suffered a great deal of loss and pain, where there was even armed force being used, and where the children of Israel had been taken into captivity. In spite of all that, he finds solace, comfort, and strength in God. And so he writes, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yes, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Let us pray. Our loving God, we do recognize you as the Good Shepherd, although at times we admit to question and even doubt. At times like these, we wonder sometimes about goodness. And yet, within our hearts, we know you are with us and that you even share our pain. We thank you for the time we've had with Jim. We remember with gratitude his life, his work, his faith, and his love. We praise you for the knowledge that you have, as a good shepherd, prepared an even better pasture and new life for those who have finished their time on earth. And so we are able, even though with some pain, to leave Jim in your hands, assured that he is safe and secure, free from pain and disability, and living in your closer presence. We pray that you will help us Don't let our thoughts linger in grief and pain. Be near to us in love and power, and help us to overcome sorrow with joy. Give us the strength and the faith to return to the tasks that wait for us in the world, committed to being more faithful to you and more helpful to each other, for the sake of those no longer with us on earth. To you, our loving God, we do give the praise and the glory, now and forever. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
We now have a recording of the eulogy sent to us by Andy Budgel, brother-in-law and friend of Jim's.
Good afternoon. Firstly, and especially during this time of COVID, on behalf of Lorraine and her family, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andy Budgel, and I am a close friend of Jim's. We even consider ourselves to be brother-in-laws, or as Jim used to say, one of the Taylor sisters' husbands. I first met Jim 30 years ago on a cold, dark Albertan night at High Prairie when Lorraine's sister Ruthie and I went to visit them. I'll always remember the warm welcome I received from Jim, the extra firm handshake, and his comment with a hearty laugh, "Wow, you must be serious about her. She never lets anyone carry her luggage." We have been close friends since that first meeting. Today, yes, we are gathered here to mourn the death of a loving husband, father, grandfather, brother, son-in-law, family member, and a dear friend. But we're also gathered to remember and celebrate who Jim was and how he deeply touched everyone who knew him. His warm, friendly nature, his ability to connect with people, get along with anyone and everyone, his humor, and his love of conversation. To never be at a loss for words. James Michael Frantik was born in Aurora, Illinois, USA in June of 1953, and he passed away on January the 8th of 2021. Jim moved to Canada, specifically Leoville, Saskatchewan, with his father and brothers in 1965. He became a proud Canadian citizen in 2009. In his early years in Canada, Jim, at the age of 13, and while still at school, lived and worked on the farm of Myron and Irene Hockel, with whom he built a special bond and has remained friends with them forever, always stopping to see them when he went back to visit Leoville. Though Jim had many achievements in his life, his most proud was his family. He married the love of his wife, Lorraine, or Maggie, as he fondly called her, and they have 3 beautiful daughters, Christina, Sheena, and Tanis, and he also has a son, Nat. He had a fierce pride of his family and was a devoted husband to Lorraine and proud father to his girls. Jim taught his girls that they could accomplish anything they put their minds to and be anything they wanted to be. He always told me how happy he was and how well his 3 girls turned out, the values they have attained, and how they treat other people. Jim was a big part of that. He took to grandparenting right off, and even though he was in so much pain in the latter stages of his life, The smile on his face and the light in his eyes when he held his grandkids or when they were around him was testament to the joy they gave him and how he loved them. Jim was a practicing Christian. He was very devoted to his faith and to his church community. Jim was an outdoors kind of guy. He was most at home when he was in the outdoors and spent his early adult years working in the forest and lumber industry, and then in firefighting and search and rescue. While living in High Prairie, he was a member of the town's volunteer fire department and took that job very seriously. He was known for his leadership and mentoring skills and is still held in high esteem by members of the fire department. Jim has a legacy there, and they tell me that stories about him are still told around the fire hall. He certainly knew his way around the bush and has received awards and recognition from the province for his devotion and commitment to saving and protecting communities and Albertans. He dedicated over 20 years to wildlands firefighting, most often in lead roles where his calmness, experience, and let's get it done attitude made him most effective. Jim was not one to sit idly by when things were happening. If there was something going on in the community, he liked to get involved. He was an active member of Ducks Unlimited and participated in many fundraisers for many different events. Because of his likable nature, infectious laugh, and great sense of humor, he was a valued and sought-after team member or oft-times team leader. This sense of humor was often to the detriment of his girls. Just ask them about it. You know, Jim and I have been friends for over 30 years, from the first time we met. Over that time, we have visited each other many times, talked over the phone many times, traveled together, fished together, and I don't fish with just anybody, and have become close buddies. He was one of the friendliest guys I ever knew and would strike up a conversation with almost anyone he met, often to the amusement of Lorraine, who would say, "Oh, he'll be along. He's just talking to a guy he met over there." Jim always had a big smile. He gave you big hugs, and you had to be ready for his sense of humor. Jim was the kind of guy you could talk to about anything and would give you his opinion on a huge variety of topics. Sometimes you didn't even have to ask him. He was a deep thinker and would surprise you with some of his thoughts and ideas, often catching you off guard and thus rendering you speechless. Although I did see him speechless once, when we surprised him, with Lorraine's help, in Vegas, where they went to celebrate their 25th. When he opened the door to their hotel room and saw Ruthie and I standing there, all he could say for a couple of minutes was, "Right on, right on." On their visits to us in Victoria, I loved having him out on the boat with me. I think he really liked the freedom of being out on the ocean, and he was a darn good fisherman for a prairie boy. I remember once we were not having much luck, and he came up with the idea that we should change direction, come up in depth a little bit, and troll a little faster. Well, wouldn't you know it, it worked, and we limited out in a very short time. Of course, he never let me forget that one for a long time. What a guy. We talked about tons of things during our time spent on the boat, sometimes even missing the bite because we were deep in conversation. On our visits to him and Lorraine in Alberta, I saw how much Jim loved working in his garden, and they had quite the garden. He also loved tending to the many bird feeders he had on his property, and then watching all the birds that they attracted. It surprised me how many of the different species of birds that he knew, till I find out Jim had a book of birds. Jim was genuinely interested in people's opinions on a host of topics, and if he asked your opinion on something, he wanted to hear it and would listen to your answer. He may not agree with your opinion, and you may not agree with his, but all the better, as he loved to get into discussions with people. With Jim's death, I have lost one of my best friends. He will not only be missed dearly by Lorraine, Christina, Sheena, Tanis, and all members of his immediate family, but also by all those who knew him. Once you met Jim and got to know him, he's not an easy man to forget. Rest in peace, my brother, and as the song says, go rest high on that mountain. In closing, I would like to read an excerpt from a poem taken from the book Proof of Heaven. The poem was written by David M. Romano. So when tomorrow starts without me, don't think we're far apart. For every time you think of me, I'm right here in your heart.
Thank you, Andy, for sharing those lovely memories. I invite Jim's brother, Bob, to share his tribute with us.
Pretty boring, eh? What the Uncle Bob reading this mic here, eh? But what if Jim was cleaning this same mic? What would it look like? Ready? Jim would have made this mic into a person. You'd be, how you doing, Mike? I haven't seen you for a while, Mike. How's it going, Mike? He would get into it. Not only that, here's this thing. He would make it fun, right? He'd make it fun. He'd be cleaning the mic. Not only would he be cleaning the mic, he'd get some facial expressions going, right? And then he had to have some words in there, like humana. I'm not really sure what a humana is, but you know, you get that humana, and he gets the facial expressions. You know, he gets this mic to the point that everybody wants to come and clean this mic, right? But now, what if Jim was going to talk to Frankie or Dexter or small kids? How would he clean the same mic? How would he clean that? You got to get the humana in there. You ready? Humana, beep, 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 humana, beep, 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 beep. He'd turn into the Muppet Show, wouldn't he? That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah. Well, a little bit, so try and behave. Here. Loaf of bread and butter. No, wrong list. Hopefully I brought the speech. One of these pockets. Oh, not that pocket. Okay. Sorry. All right, let's do it. COVID. You know what? If this wasn't COVID, just imagine the amount of impact that Jim had with people. Can you imagine? This hall would be packed. The outside would be full of people. It would be pouring out into the street. You know, it's just different times, right? Well, one night, a few nights ago, I was thinking about this. Okay, I'm going to say a few words. Well, let's get on to what is a brother. I wonder what the Google machine has to say about what a brother is. And we looked it up, and it said there was 3 things. Number 1 means a hand to hold. And I know this is true, because the last time I saw Jim, he put his hand out to put his hand out. And we held hands. And Jim told me how much he loved me. So I know that was true. The second meeting is a shoulder to lean on. I also know this is true. Because when my dad passed away, we were at the graveyard, and I was breaking inside. I really was. And Jim came over to me, and he said, "Bob," and he went like this. He waved me in. And I took his shoulder, I cried on his shoulder, and I'll tell you what, it really, really helped. So I do know that is true. The third thing is an ear to listen. And I know this is true because Jim and I, we would wait for our wives to go to work. And then we'd phone each other every day, every second day, and we'd talk about whatever. Jim would be with his birds or looking at his deer with his coffee. And so we talked, and yes, I definitely had an ear to listen. Helen also came up with a quote when we were looking this up, and the quote is, "A brother is like having a best friend baked right into the cookie of life." And I thought, wow, that's something. Now, love, brothers, they don't really tell that they love each other. And as a rule, what brothers do is they pick on each other, because that's what brothers do, right? So, I'll use an example. It's first day of summer, it's hot out. I'm getting into my shorts for the summer, Jim would look at me and look at my chicken legs there, and that's exactly what he said. He said, "You look like you're riding a chicken, boy." And I got another one. My brothers used to call me pork chop. And I thought, then pork chop, what's this? Pork chop. So I asked Jim, I said, "Why do my brothers call me pork chop?" Well, Jim said, "When you were young," he said, "you were so ugly." He said that Dad used to put a pork chop around your neck so the dogs would play with you. That's funny. Okay, let's get into some story time here. How many of you have ever experienced the outdoor toilets when you were kids? Probably quite a few, right? Well, for us, we were very poor. In our outhouse was the Sears catalog. And my brothers, they come up with a way that they could take that Sears catalog and crunch it up and crunch it up and crunch it up until it got soft as toilet paper. But for me, waiting outside the toilet for these guys to do their magic with their, it was very long. It seemed like it took them forever. But I was thinking on the bright side, waiting for them, I did learn how to dance, waiting for the toilet. And I was also thinking, talk about Jim with all the faces that he had and stuff like that. Well, that might be from the same era, waiting. So it was kind of funny. I guess we can go on to, the summers at the farm. We usually have a family reunion. A lot of us would come there, but before everybody comes, there would be a few of us, and we'd go cleaning trails and get the farm ready for everybody, and Sheena was a big part of that. Remember that? So Jim and Ned and Sheena, a few other people if we could. We'd get out there clearing the trails. Sheena would have to get me back every once in a while because I'd be picking berries or whatever. So then when we were all done that, then we'd go to the farm, and that night we'd take a bottle out and put it in the middle of the table, and Ed and I would start having a few drinks and telling stories and jokes, and Jim wasn't very much of a drinker though, and we'd try and get him to join in. It took a little while, but then finally we'd convince him, come on Jim, just one drink. So we'd get him involved. But I knew when Jim was with us for sure, because all of a sudden Jim would say, Bob. I'd say, what? He'd say, what do you call a man with no arms and no legs in a swimming pool? What? He says, Bob, he said. Okay, and then he'd say, well, what do you call a lady with one leg shorter than the other? And I'd say, I don't know, Jim. He said, Eileen. So, I knew he was in at that point. There was one time we did keep him up longer than we should have, and we poured him into bed about 3 o'clock in the morning. And just happened that Roland Susie, a few hours later, was bringing all the tin for the roof at the farm to put a new roof on. So after 3 hours of sleep, waking Jim up, I can tell you, oh boy, was he grumpy with me. So, anyways, in closing, I just want to say, wherever Jim has gone, I know the door will be wider. I know the light will be brighter now that he is there. Love you, big guy.
Thank you so much, Bob, for your tribute. I'd like to take this time to share some condolences that have been sent to the family. From Troy, Heidi, and Haley O'Connor, losing Jim is such a big loss for everyone. When he was away with us at work, his heart was always at home with you and your family. His love for you, the girls, and lately his grandchildren was always his main concern, and he talked of you all constantly. Your happiness was always his first priority in every conversation about home. Losing his father, brothers, and mother weighed on him all the way through. He was such a kind and loving man that way. It was an honor to share in his life for so many years. I can't tell you how often he helped me personally. He always kept me on the right track as far as the big things went. Jim will forever be my mentor. When I think of how to act, how to treat people, and what to say in the right way, he comes second only to my grandfather Charlie. We hope you find some comfort in his passing through your love in God and family, as well as the hope that he is now with those that he loved and cared for so very much. May peace be with you all, and our deepest love and sympathy. From Derek Stout. Jim mentored myself on the High Prairie Fire Department, and I've always held dearly everything he's done for me and the extra time he took making sure I was prepared and ready. I will always remember his caring nature, his absolutely perfect humor, and everything he did for me. From Michael Caron. Stories about Jim still get told around the High Prairie Fire Hall. A fantastic man. From Tammy Mack. I'll never forget his big smile, hugs, and always making jokes and teasing us when we were kids. From Vern Tetz. I met Jim through forestry. He was our dozer boss. Jim was very good at bringing everyone together and working as a team. Jim and I have shared hours of conversation covering a wide range of topics, solving all kinds of problems. I will miss these calls. From Keith, Edith Branting, and family. Jim was a great guy and gifted us with many fond memories from his days at Buchanan's, sending heartfelt condolences. From John McLevin. I will dearly miss Jim. He was a source of great happiness when I was with him, a wonderful father, husband, grandfather to his family, and a wonderful resource when we needed him. From Robert and Julie Matzner. Robert had a lot of respect for James and considered him a friend. James was here on the farm a lot, many years ago. Please accept our deepest condolences and take care. And from Donnie Matzner. Once you meet Jim, you'll never forget him. With his big smile and infectious laugh, he'd put you in a great mood and perhaps get you into a bit of trouble. The last name says it all, Frantik! I'd like to share some of my favorite memories with you. Jim and I, being 16-year-old boys, needed our driver's license. Jim was working at our neighbor's farm, and there was only one in the area that had a phone. Jim called and arranged for the two of us to do our road tests. Jim convinced the farmer to allow us to use his car. The farmer drove us to Spiritwood for our tests. But our first stop was the bulk fuel station, as the farmer had dealings there. These dealings were taking far too long for Jim, and not wanting to be late, said, "Don, hop in the car." And Jim drove us to the SCI office, parking beautifully right in front of the building. Jim took his road test first, then it was my turn. After both tests were done, we waited patiently for our results. The tester soon returned. We were convinced that we'd both passed. Developed that he watched us through the front window drive up to the office, so we both flunked. Another time, Jim left to work in BC one winter. When he returned, he stopped in North Battleford and bought a brand new BSA motorbike. He drove it home to the same farm he had been working for. Wow, everyone was impressed with the bike. Well, except my mom and dad. One Saturday, Jim drove over to the farm on his bike, and we decided to go to Chittick Lake that evening. Mom and Dad didn't want me to go, but I sweet-talked them into it. Jim loved to drive, and he loved to drive fast. We both hopped on his bike, and on gravel roads we headed to town, while we tore up the town and headed home. Two happy lads. The cops did chase us, but couldn't catch us. The next weekend, we were going to do it again, but Mom and Dad put a stop to that. Then there were times in the summer where it was long and boring, but not with Jim around. Many a time, he and I took a back road excursion from Chittick Lake to Meadow Lake for beer in his truck. It was a very sandy and windy bush road. Curvy corner was a new, scary experience. Every trip was time to try to outdo our previous record. We did ditch it a few times. How we lived, I don't know. There are many more great stories. Some I can tell, and some I cannot. If there were more Jim Frantiks in the world, it would be a better place. Jim was always a loyal and trusted friend. If you needed anything, all you had to do is ask, and Jim would be there. I love you, buddy. A truer friend cannot be found. Until we meet again. As a funeral director, conversations about death and dying come up more often than most other people encounter. I've certainly had it posed to me before to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing to know in advance that you're dying. On one hand, you have time to prepare. On the other hand, it might be better to go without having to think about it for so long. That knowledge has a way of casting a dark shadow over everything. It would be a tough call, whether you would want to know or not. And for Jim, we knew his days were numbered with his unfortunate diagnosis. And it was difficult watching his health dwindle away. But I know that all who knew Jim are thankful for the many years that they had with him. And when it comes to death and the conversations surrounding it, truth be told, we all know. The real issue is when, not if. Some of us just act like we're going to be the exception. Hollywood star Woody Allen spoke for a lot of people when he said, "Well, I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens." It reminds me of a discussion I once overheard while three men were talking about their own funeral wishes. One asked, "What would you like folks to say at your service?" Another thought for a minute. "I'd like them to say he was a great humanitarian who cared about his community." The fellow who initiated the conversation replied, "I'd like them to say he was a great husband and father who was an example for many to follow." The two nodded in agreement, looked to the silent buddy. Without hesitation, he added, "I'd like them to say, 'Look, he's moving!'" By remembering death, you also remember that life is valuable and every action is significant. Being aware of death, you can also be aware of yourself and live an authentic life. A life you really want to live and not one controlled by fear. The purpose of my message here is, death is easy. Our battle is over, and we go to be with those who have left before us. It's the ones who are left behind who now have to continue their journey without you and find who they are. Life is a difficult portion, and one that's worthwhile. Take today as an opportunity to evaluate how you can grow from the experiences that Jim has left you with. How can you make more of each day and surround yourself with the love of family and friends? We never know when our time will come. How can we make the best of the time that we do have? These are questions that only you can answer, but a premise to start with is by living in love and in light. To be kind to others and take time to enjoy our surroundings. Trying to put aside our daily stresses and focusing on the joy and beauty that life each day has to offer. In thinking about how Jim lived his life each day with purpose, we can reflect upon these memories with a slideshow composed by Lisa Beroldi and Mustafa Sahin.
Sun's up, looks okay. The world survives into another day, and I'm thinking about eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. I had another dream about lions at the door. They weren't half as frightening as they were before, but I'm thinking about eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. Walls, windows, trees, waves coming through. You being me and I'll be in you, together in eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. Up among the firs where it smells so sweet, or down in the valley where the river used to be, I got my mind on eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me, and I'm wondering where the lions are. 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 Huge orange flying boat rises off a lake. 1,000-year-old petroglyphs doing a double take, pointing the finger at eternity. I'm sitting in the middle of this ecstasy. A young man marching, helmet shining in the sun, polished and precise like the brain behind the gun should be. They got me thinking about eternity, but some kind of ecstasy
hands folded silently in prayer and reaching out to hold me when I had a nightmare. You could read quite a story in the calluses and lines. Years of work and worry had left their mark behind. I remember Daddy's hands, how they held my mama tight and patted my back for something done right. There are things that I've forgotten that I loved about the man, but I'll always remember the love in Daddy's hands. Daddy's hands were soft and kind when I was crying. Daddy's hands were hard as steel when I'd done wrong. Daddy's hands weren't always gentle, but I've come to understand there was always love in Daddy's hands. I remember Daddy's hands working till they bled, sacrificed unselfishly just to keep us all fed. If I could do things over, I'd live my life again and never take for granted the love in Daddy's hands. Daddy's hands were soft and kind when I was crying. Daddy's hands were hard as steel when I'd done wrong. Daddy's hands weren't always gentle, but I've come to understand there was always love in Daddy's hands. Daddy's hands were soft and kind when I was crying. Daddy's hands were hard as steel when I'd done wrong. Daddy's hands weren't always gentle, but I've come to understand there was always love in Daddy's hands.
Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Sometimes it feels like this world's gone crazy. Grandpa, take me back to yesterday, when the line between right and wrong didn't seem so hazy. Did lovers really fall in love to stay and stand beside each other, come what may? Promise really something people kept, not just something they would say. Families really bow their heads to pray. Daddies really never go away. Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. just don't know. And Grandpa, let's wander back into the past, then paint me the picture of long ago. Lovers really fall in love to stay, stand beside each other, come what may. Is promise really something people kept, not just something they would say and then forget? Families really bow their heads to pray, daddies really never go away. Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Families really bow their heads to pray, daddies really never go away.
Following the service, we'll be departing for the Leoville Cemetery for the graveside. All are welcome to join. Come walk through the beautiful fields with me, enraptured by musical sounds of the wild, for creatures of nature we happen to be, made open and free as an innocent child, enthralled with the wonder of earth's majesty, abandoned with nature where God's love has smiled. Our worldly dark troubles will magically flee, erasing the sorrowful memories filed. Tranquility flows everywhere peacefully, with fragrance of nature sweet-scented and mild. Where life dwells unhindered and gracefully free, absorbing the essence of earth's modesty, with stillness and beauty of nature compiled. Come, walk through the beautiful fields with me, where life dwells unhindered and gracefully free. As the service draws to a close, I'll ask you to take a moment of silence to remember the life of James Michael Frantik and the legacy that he leaves behind.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who gets drunk next to you. And if I haver, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who's havering to you. But I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door. When I'm walking, yes, I know I'm gonna be the man who's working hard for you. And when the money comes in for the work I do, I'll pass almost every penny on to you. When I come home, oh, I know I'm gonna be I'm lonely, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who's lonely without you. And when I'm dreaming, well, I know I'm gonna dream about the time when I'm with you. When I go out